And joining us now is Matt Shoemaker, a former intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency. Matt, good to be with you today. So as you know, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in Moscow today. Talk to us about the objective about this trip and what needs to be done.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me. So the main point of any of this is that the American delegation actually just had negotiations with Ukraine in Saudi Arabia over the past couple days. And they agreed, or at least the Ukrainians agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, assuming that the Russians themselves agreed to it. So the Americans have jettisoned over to Moscow where they're having meetings and to see if the Russians are willing to play ball more than anything. This is really what it comes down to, because President Trump's entire negotiating strategy so far was play nice with Russia publicly, turn the screws on Ukraine in order to get them to the negotiating table. Now the real question is, are the Russians playing in good faith, or are there actually bad actors behind there just trying to create tension between the Ukrainians and the Americans? So we're going to find that out very quickly.
Yeah, Matt, what's your sense? I mean, what do you think is going to happen with Russia?
This really comes down to one man's decision, President Putin, about whether or not he wants to end this. Yeah, being an intelligence officer for about 10 years, focusing on Russia, I'm very skeptical, I have to say, because this really is part and parcel of Russian operations and the way that the Russians conduct themselves. Just in the past few days, the Russians executed 5 Ukrainian prisoners of war in violation of the Geneva Convention. So there really isn't any sense from the Russian side that they're willing to play by the rules. So I'm very skeptical, to say the least.
Yeah, and in his press conference today, Vladimir Putin said that he wants a lasting peace, but that the current ceasefire deal may not provide that. So that being said, what do you think happens?
That part is hard to say. This 30-day ceasefire is supposed to be an initial step towards a lasting peace. So even if we do get the Russians to accept the 30-day ceasefire proposal, it really is up in the air whether or not we can even achieve a greater lasting peace. The thing that I'm really going to be looking for in particular are the Russian demands, because the Russians are not passively sitting by. They're very much a mafia state, for that matter. So they're going to try and get absolutely everything out of it that they possibly can, in which case what I'm going to be looking for is, for their demands, are they going to require that NATO is not allowed to send any troops from any NATO members into Ukraine whatsoever? That will be a big one. Another aspect will be if Ukraine will be allowed to join NATO at some point in the future. That's also been a major demand of the Russians as well. So those are the 2 key components that I'm going to be looking for, whether or not the Russians are sticking to their guns in terms of what they want.
Yeah, Matt, let me ask you this quickly. I'm almost out of time, but what about the land that Russia currently occupies in Ukraine? Do you think that might be part of this deal? Do you think they're going to try and keep that?
That's going to be very difficult for the Ukrainians to get that back. The Russians are going to stand by that come hell or high water. They've already included it in their constitution that those lands are part of the Russian Federation. So they would have to do constitutional amendments, which for the Russians wouldn't be too terribly hard, but that's the legal isms that are surrounding this. So it would be very difficult for the Russians to give that up.
Okay. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your insights, Matt. God bless.
My pleasure. Thank you.